Hey, it's Coach Anderson here again, Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up with Unit 2, which is on the industrialization of the United States of America. It is a period in our history from 1865 to 1901. We're going to see a period in which there's rapid industrialization in the country, which means there's going to be a rise in big business. And that's where we'll begin today. Just as we always tell you that if you have a journal, or if you have a journal, you can go ahead and write down any questions that you may have in terms of the learning focus, the unit focus, and of course the vocabulary. We will start today with lesson 1 from 1865 to 1901, the rise of industry. Industry, of course, will be business. The unit focus question that we have, and as we do with every chapter or every unit that we have, is we give you a unit focus question. That is what should guide your thought process as we go through the lessons, of course, in Unit 2. The unit focus questions for Unit 2 is, how did the United States become an industrialized society after the Civil War? In other words, how did we transition from being more of a rural agrarian, which means farming, society, to more of an industrialized or business-oriented or manufacturing-oriented society. We're going to start, of course, with a do now activity. In your journals, what you should do at this time, of course, is write down the journal topic. And what it says is list as many foreign nationalities as you can that have come to the United States. We'll give you a few minutes. You can go ahead and start that activity now. Well, you should have had enough time that you were able to go through, of course, and look at the journal topic. And the do now activity says list as many nationalities as you can. And I gave you an example, of course, it would be the Irish. The Irish started coming to this country in the 1830s, 1840s because of the potato blight. But you could have said Italians, you could have said Scottish, you could have said British or English. You could have said any number of different nationalities from Western Europe, because that's usually where we gravitate. We think about the European countries that come here, but you can't forget about the Asians, of course, that are coming to this country in the forms of the Chinese, the Japanese. So when we're looking at the nationalities coming to this country, there are many and varied, and that's why we call America the Great American Melting Pot. Today, what we're going to do, of course, is look at our vocabulary. The vocabulary that we have up here today, of course, it's going to be resources, practice, gross national product, laissez-faire, and entrepreneur. And as we reach each one of those particular vocabulary terms, what we will do, of course, is we will try to highlight them and then, of course, address them as we go. Lesson focus question, just as we have a unit focus question that should guide your thought process when it comes to the unit, we have lesson focus questions, of course, that should guide your thinking when it comes to each individual lesson. So the rise of industry, the lesson focus question what you have are these 3 questions. Why was the United States successful in industrialization? What innovations impacted the success of business during the Industrial Revolution of America? And how did laissez-faire economics promote industrialization? This is a picture of Samuel Slater. He is called the father of American Industrial Revolution. By the early 1900s, the United States was the leading industrial nation in the world. Its gross national product was 3 times larger than it had been during the 1860s, when we were primarily an agrarian society or a farm-oriented society. So at that particular time, we started to lead the world in terms of industrial output. The United States industrializes. After the Civil War, the United States of America has millions of Americans, of course, leave their farms, of course, after the Civil War, and they start turning to northern cities and industry. Especially if you look at African Americans who leave the South, or freed slaves that leave the South, and they're looking for a new and a better start. In most cases, they either went to Kansas, or north to Kansas, or they went north to the industrialized societies. The availability of labor, the abundant natural resources, and advances in technology like electricity spurred the development of the Industrial Revolution in America. So when we look at the 2 things that impact the United States of America becoming industrialized more than anything, it's because of the abundance of labor, and then, of course, the abundant natural resources that we have, which was an advantage we had over most nations. Some of the natural resources that can be found in great abundance in the United States of America that leads to the Industrial Revolution or aids it is going to be timber, coal, iron, copper, oil, and any number of different things, of course, that you could possibly think about when you look at natural resources in this country. The labor and workforce. Between 1860 and 1910, the population of the United States of America tripled, creating a vast workforce of American industry. The reason for the increase in population was threefold. Number 1, immigrants from Europe and Asia. People were living longer, and people experienced better living conditions, which caused fewer child deaths. So more children living, people living longer, and immigration, of course, from other areas around the world. Sources of immigration in 1860 and 1900, what we want to do is, of course, is push your eyes to a couple of areas. If you see that purple area, look at Germans. Between 1860 and 1900, one of the largest groups that comes to America, of course, is going to be the German population. The British at 18%, the Irish at 15%. Now you have to understand the Irish got a little bit of a jump on everyone else in that they were coming in large numbers way back in the 1840s because of the Irish potato famine or the potato blight. Now, one of the things we also want you to make sure you understand is that you don't see Southern Europe mentioned there. We're going to find that during the second wave of immigration around 1890, we're going to see that people from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe are going to come in greater numbers. The driving force behind the means to power the Industrial Revolution was Thomas Edison's creation of, his experimentation and innovation, of course, with electricity, and more specifically, the creation of the light bulb, which allows people, of course, to work longer. And for the first time, we're going to look at shift work. So now when the sun goes down, doesn't mean after work has to stop. Because you have lights now, of course, we can create shifts. So if a business wanted to, or a manufacturer wanted to, they could, of course, extend the workday even, all night if they want, in terms of looking at shift work. And we have a lot of shift work, of course, in our society today. And that's all because of Edison's innovations when it comes to electricity and the light bulb. Some of the innovators and inventions, of course, that were created, we'll look at just a few of them. Edison and the light bulb, Westinghouse and alternating current, Samuel F.B. Morse and telegraph, Cyrus Field with the telegraph, the transatlantic telegraph, Alexander Graham Bell, Thaddeus Lowe, the ice maker, Josephine Cochrane, the automatic dishwasher, Gustavus Swift. So the list kind of goes on and on. And when you look at these innovations, they're going to have a tremendous impact, of course, on the United States of America. And one of the things it's going to do is they're going to free up Americans, of course, to do other things. Leisure time becomes very big during this particular time. Edison on the left, Westinghouse on the right, innovators. On the left, you have Samuel F.B. Morse, responsible for the laying of the transatlantic telegraph cable. On the right, you have Samuel Morse created the telegraph, and on the right, you have Cyrus W. Field, responsible for laying the transatlantic telegraph cable. You have Alexander Graham Bell and the telephone. Now, Bell, of course, was a Scottish immigrant, just like Andrew Carnegie, that we'll talk about a little bit later. And once again, an immigrant that came from another portion of the world, came to America, of course, and had tremendous impact on our society. On the left, we have Thaddeus Lowe. He was an innovator in refrigeration. And then Gustavus Swift. So Lowe is responsible more or less for creating what would become the refrigerator, and Gustavus Swift becomes responsible for creating something called the refrigerated train rail car. And because of the refrigerated rail car, it's going to impact the open range, specifically the cattle drives. Remember, we were talking about in the last lesson, of course, how those, longhorn cattle, of course, were rounded up in Texas and driven to those cow towns. And in those cow towns, of course, they would be sent to places like Chicago and St. Louis, where they could be packed and, of course, sent to eastern cities to be sold. Well, because of Gustavus Swift, who's also one of the founders of Swift Meatpacking in Chicago, that still exists today. Frank Duryea in the Phaeton. He and his brother Charles Duryea created one of the first motor cars, and in it, you see him sporting, of course, the Phaeton, of course, and those aren't 22s; those are more like 42s that he has on it. So when you look at the Phaeton and the beginning of automotion, or in terms of the automobile, we look at our contribution, Frank and his brother Charles Duryea. The innovation of the late 1800s caused an increase in the standard of living for people throughout the United States. Innovation also caused the rise of big business, lower prices, and the disappearance of small craft businesses. So even though industrialization does bring in a change, the change is not necessarily great for everyone, especially if you were a small craft business, or like you were a shoemaker or something like that, or a tailor. Those kind of businesses will, watchmaking, those kind of businesses, of course, will kind of fall by the wayside and be pushed out of the marketplace by big business. United States free market system is what we call capitalism. In looking at our free market system, what we believe with that is that the government should not interfere in business. And this is going to be the hallmark of the American economic society. So when we look at free enterprise, it is the belief that the United States of America's government should keep a hands-off approach when it comes to American business. The benefits of laissez-faire, or that hands-off approach. It promotes limited government involvement in business, advocates lower no taxes or tariffs, no government regulation of business activity, free market based on supply and demand, and creates more wealth for all citizens, in theory for all citizens, or the opportunity for wealth for all citizens, is increased. The greatest impact that the government had on business prior to 1900 was the creation of the protected tariffs and the granting of subsidies. High tariffs protected American business from European products, but hurt American farmers. Subsidies to businesses through railroads and roads and canals and infrastructure bolstered American business. What we're going to find that in the late 1800s, the United States of America's government is going to do more, of course, to support business and less to support the American farmer. And that's going to be one of those indications that we go from a more agrarian society to a more lesser from an agrarian society and more to a more industrialized society. All right. What we have now done is we've gotten to the lesson focus questions. And remember what we said, the lesson focus questions are to guide what our main thoughts are for lesson one, which was the rise of industry. The first question is, why was the United States successful in industrialization? Well, the answer to that, of course, is real simple. When you look at it, we had abundant labor and we had abundant natural resources. So when you look at why the United States of America is so successful when it comes to industrialization, number one, we had so many people, of course, in terms of the workforce. And then number two, we had abundant natural resources that could be used in the manufacture of different products. Second question in terms of lesson focus, what innovation impacted the success of business during the Industrial Revolution in America? Well, we told you about all those inventions and those inventors. And so the answer to that, of course, would be something that looks like this. It would be innovations, of course, in communication, transportation, and energy. Communication, Bell and the telephone, Morse and the telegraph. Transportation, of course, with Phaeton, the creation of the Phaeton, of course, with the Duryea brothers, and then, of course, Gustavus Swift and the refrigerated train car. And then in energy, Edison, of course, and Westinghouse. The last lesson focus question, of course, was about laissez-faire. And it says, how did laissez-faire economics promote industrialization? Well, the answer, of course, to that is kind of simple also. Remember what we said, it says government interference in business was minimal, and the free market would determine the success or the failure of entrepreneurs. So when you look at our country in the industrialization period, one of the one common themes that you should see is that the government, of course, does what it can to bolster or support business, in some cases at the detriment to the farmers and small craft businesses. Give you a few practice questions, of course, that would be helpful for you, of course, when it comes to the MAP test. Use the information below to answer the question that follows. Foreign-born population by decade. In 1850, 9.7% was foreign-born. By 1870, 14.4% was foreign-born. By 1890, 14.8% of the population was foreign-born. And it says, what factor best explains the increase in immigration depicted in each 20-year time band? Well, we told you why a lot of these people, of course, came to America. They came because of opportunity. So the answer would be the increased demand for industrial workers. One more question. This is what statement best reflects the idea of laissez-faire? The government buys up surplus to increase the demand for the product. The government mandating all business set an 8-hour workday. C, the government repealing all income taxes on business. And the government placing price caps on products during difficult economic times. Well, remember we said one of the proponents of laissez-faire, of course, was to not have taxes or have minimal taxes, of course, and tariffs. So the answer, of course, would be C, government repealing all income taxes on business. That takes us to the end of lesson one. And what we try to do is give you some ideas about why and how the United States of America transitioned to a more industrialized society, and give you some insights in terms of the impact that some of those things, of course, had on American society, specifically craft business owners and, of course, farmers. But don't have to take my word for it. Remember what I always tell you. Don't take my word for it or anyone else's word for it. It is America's history, which means it's your history. So do your own research and reach your own conclusions. And with that, we'll say, have a nice day.